Well, welcome to another PAVE virtual panel. Thank you all in the audience for joining us today for our latest discussion, AVs at Work, Moving Goods. This month, we're looking beyond the application of autonomous technology in passenger vehicles to explore other applications across the transportation space. Last week, we had a conversation on transit, and I'm excited today to discuss movement of goods with our panelists. As a reminder, you'll be able to find the full recording of this panel after it ends, as well as all of our previous virtual panels on our YouTube channel, website at pavecampaign.org, or social media at pavecampaign. My name is Tabitha Coulter, and I'm PAVE's Director of Operations and the moderator for today's panel. We have three great guests today I'm excited to introduce you to. First, we have Rachel Griffin, Director of Autonomous Transportation at Walmart. Rachel, welcome to our discussion today.
Thanks, Tabitha. Glad to be here.
Our second panelist is Carter Stern, Senior Government Affairs Manager at Cruise. Carter, great to have you involved.
Thanks, Tabitha. Happy to be here.
And finally, we have Sam Saad, Head of Strategic Initiatives at Gatik. Sam, good to see you today.
Good to see you, Tabitha, and hi to the audience.
Thank you three for joining us here at PAVE today for this conversation on AVs and delivering goods. I want to start off by helping the audience understand the context for today's discussion. Rachel, what does Walmart's distribution system look like today? Could you explain the hub and spoke model?
Right. Thanks, Tabitha. Well, Walmart became best in class at getting goods from our distribution centers to on the shelves at our stores. And as customer behavior has evolved over time, we've evolved to extend that all the way to the customer's homes. This means, one, we need a creative supply chain models to move goods, not only from our DCs, but also from our stores. And two, we need innovative solutions to automate that process. Today, we think of our stores as fulfillment centers that are just super close to our customers. And we're currently exploring how we can move goods and orders between those locations and get things to customers faster than ever before. We started actually, to your question on the hub and spoke model, we started with Gatik in Bentonville, Arkansas, where we had a route where we were picking orders at one location and moving them to another location that customers could conveniently pick up at. And we received approval from the Arkansas Highway Commission to remove the driver in that operation. Based on the success of that operation, we expanded it to New Orleans and Metairie, Louisiana this year, where it's actually 20 miles that we're operating. And with Cruise, we're excited to begin our pilot for last mile delivery with using their autonomous vehicles to deliver Walmart grocery in Scottsdale, Arizona.
That's great, thank you. Now, Sam, as Rachel mentioned, your company Gatik is focused on automating the middle mile portion of this distribution model. Can you explain what middle mile means? What are those routes like, and why do they lend themselves to automation?
Sure can. So Rachel grabbed some of the best talking points there and just kind of highlighted the great work that we've been doing to help make Walmart's distribution and online fulfillment capacity truly best in class. But to add a little bit of color there, there's a shift essentially in e-commerce orders around consumer expectations on when they can have their orders ready. And the orders can either be ready at a retail location nearby where they can just drive in at their convenience and have the orders loaded directly into the boot of their or the trunk of their vehicle, or of course they can have orders delivered directly to doorstep. Both are very convenient and both are options that Walmart offers. The part that we fill is we carry orders from a centralized e-commerce field fulfillment facility to one of those retail locations where the consumer can then drive in at their convenience and have the orders placed in their vehicle. And the big shift that we're seeing, so that's, in generally speaking, that's the middle mile. The big shift that we're seeing is for e-commerce SKUs to always remain on digital shelves, having a centralized fulfillment facility is absolutely key. So if you're trying to do all of this fulfillment at each and every single retail location, you'd have to keep every SKU that you have available on your digital shelves also available on those physical shelves. And that's quite an undertaking. The flip side of that is that a customer pops online and says, I'd like to order Diet Pepsi. And you say, oh, it's not available. You have to go to another store or maybe come back tomorrow. And I think we've all kind of participated in this. You have a disproportionate reaction when you're shopping online and you're told that a SKU is not available. So that you might not only lose that sale, you might lose that customer if they end up going to a convenience store down the road or to a competitor. So what that centralization of e-commerce fulfillment allows Walmart and others to do in that middle mile is to keep all the SKUs in a single location and then have that location serve that being the hub, serve multiple spokes or retail locations. And that's where Gatik comes in. So these are known fixed routes, which are our bread and butter. Our vehicles work like busy bees, kind of going back and forth between that hub and those multiple spoke locations throughout the day, typically about 12 hours or more in a given day. And that allows that near instantaneous fulfillment of any good that you have on your digital shelf being available at most any retail location in your neighborhood.
Thanks. That was a super helpful explanation. So Carter, going to you now. Cruise is working on the last mile delivery portion of the distribution network. So same question to you. Can you explain what that means, what those routes look like, and why they lend themselves to automation?
Sure. So last mile is the best way to think about last mile is the last segment before it gets to the customer's front door. So you're thinking about urban environments for the most part, multiple stops often in one vehicle, and interacting with a built environment that is very complex. And so the reason that that is difficult for AVs is also why AVs are a great fit, right? These are high VMT. You're thinking about multiple stops, idling often to drop off a package. And so the more efficiency you can build into that process, the better. And because these deliveries are taking place in complex urban environments, the safety concerns are greater than anywhere else in the network, right? You're dealing with people, pedestrians, people on bikes, and getting that good in the hands of the customer. And so AVs are a great option because they are safer in that urban environment. They can respond dynamically to traffic or any sort of condition on the road that might necessitate a reroute, and serve those communities in a way that's safe, efficient, and with reducing emissions as much as possible.
Thank you. Those were both really helpful to explain that difference between middle and last mile. Going back to the middle mile for a moment, Rachel, what type of challenges does Walmart face in middle mile logistics today?
Yeah, so when we evaluated use cases for autonomous vehicles, the middle mile was actually a perfect fit because it's a consistent route, like Sam mentioned, in which the vehicle runs multiple times a day. And then we have associates obviously staffed at each location to help with the unloading and unloading process. And so we could slot that solution into our operation essentially immediately. And with, Walmart's footprint, about 90% of the population is within 10 miles of Walmart. We're actually uniquely positioned to leverage that middle mile capability to be able to get things to our customers faster. If you can imagine, you place an order and at one store you have shoes and another store you have shoelaces. You can move these goods around to make it super convenient for the customer where they can collect it at one spot as opposed to having to go to several stores or having to wait until it gets shipped to them. So we're all about, creating solutions to make it easier for the customer.
And Sam, anything to add there on how Gatik addresses that element of Walmart?
Yeah, happy to. So when we developed the solution, it really was trying to fit an existing gap in the market in at least two ways. So one of them was this emerging middle mile, this emerging supply chain shift that essentially meant more vehicles, longer hours, more drivers. So to meet consumer and customer expectations, everything Rachel just described needs to be put in place in a supply chain for the reasons that I kind of described earlier. But it costs a little bit more, right? Rather than having one big truck doing a milk run once or twice a week to make sure that shelves are filled in a particular location, I need multiple vehicles, multiple drivers, more hours. So we saw that pain point emerging and we said, I think that's a really good application for autonomous vehicles, because the second reason, these are fixed, known, repeatable routes. And there are a lot of essentially unstructured edge cases that are made structured when you operate on these fixed, known, repeatable routes multiple times and just essentially over optimize your system for that particular route. There's also some really nice transfer learning that happens. So when you launch new routes, it's a lot faster to get to a safety benchmark of being able to operate safely, autonomously, and also being able to remove the operator from the vehicle. The other call out I'll make is The example that Rachel gave around the shoes and shoelaces, that's slightly different than that hub and spoke model, where if you kind of picture the hub and spoke of a wheel, you typically have that centerpiece that's going out to the multiple retail locations. The inventory pooling use case is also a really nice one, where you're able to connect in more of a web all of the different stores in a local area to make sure that fulfillment and SKU consolidation is happening before the customers get to a location where they're then picking up their order, or before there's a handshake over to crews and others where they then fulfill that last mile delivery.
Great, thanks, Sam. And at the risk of being too formulaic, I want to switch back over to Carter now and have that same conversation again about the last mile. So Rachel, what are some of the challenges in last mile delivery that Walmart faces?
Yeah, we've definitely come a long way, but there's still a long way to go. Throughout the pandemic, our pickup and delivery business really increased. And now we're seeing people that relied on these services are still using them for convenience as things go back to normal. But one issue is going to be, how do we deliver when a customer isn't home, as things open up and people go back to work? Without a driver behind the wheel of an AV, customers will need to be present, ideally to collect their order from the vehicle and take it inside. So does that mean that the customer should be delivered to at some place other than their home? That may be one, or it could be that there's some type of automation to take it from the vehicle to the customer's doorstep so that they don't have to be present.
And Carter, same as what I did with Sam, could you talk about how crews can address some of those challenges?
Sure. So the major challenge with last mile delivery is just the unpredictability. We talk about middle mile and further up the pipeline. You're thinking about fixed routes, sort of supply chains that operate on a fixed schedule that are not necessarily consumer facing at all. And when a customer places an order at Walmart and it says, you're going to get your item, your widget in 30 minutes, you're going to be held to that as a customer, as Walmart, who may be our client. Like, we want to make sure that we're upholding their reputation. And of course, as commercial partners, we want to make sure that we're doing what we've agreed to do. We don't want to be the reason someone gets their widget 20 minutes late or a day late. And so autonomous vehicles are a fantastic solution to deal with that unpredictability, given that they're flexible, given that they are operating on a smaller scale, right? So you're thinking about, well, something that may look like just a standard SUV rather than a larger truck. And that to Rachel's earlier point, if we don't know where those items need to be delivered, we can inject a bit of flexibility into where, when, and how those goods are delivered. And so that's the way I really like to think about it. It's just the unpredictability that makes last mile so difficult, and AV's flexibility are what make them such a great solution to that uncertainty that's injected into the system.
And Rachel, you were just talking a little bit about, what happens when customers aren't home for that last mile pickup. And that's actually very similar. We got a question from the audience asking about that scenario, and then about people who, may be limited in their mobility and aren't able to get to a sidewalk or street. So I just want to see if you had anything else to add to kind of that area of conversation.
Yeah, we feel like last mile isn't going to be a one size fits all approach. For instance, some customers still love to come shop in our stores. So we're going to run great stores and have an environment that folks want to come shop at. And then some folks may want to pick up their order on their way home. So we need to be great at, our pickup business. And then some may want it delivered to the home, even all the way to their fridge, like we do with our in-home service. And so I think it's going to depend on what the customer wants and what they need, and they can select from, all of our different offerings, what best suits them.
Absolutely.
And I'll add one piece there. Aside from saying, Rachel, please get that in the fridge delivery launched in Canada, because I definitely
it's pretty convenient.
One of the other reasons that we decided to focus on the middle mile is because consumer, so I'll say that as Walmart's customer or the end value customer. So the consumer behavior is quite fickle. So I do live in Toronto. It's cold here for more months out of the year than I personally like. And right now I get my goods delivered to my doorstep. So what I don't have to do is put on my winter gear, walk out to the curb. It's not very far, but I just don't have to do that. And it raises the question of what's innovation. So if I'm paying the same amount, but now I have to do more work, I might not be interested in that service. I might think it's really cool to get my goods delivered through a robot once or twice, but then after that, just give it to my doorstep, especially in the middle of a snowstorm. So we wanted to kind of avoid having to navigate that changing or that sometimes fickle consumer behavior. But that idea of the last 10 feet, that's the hardest part. Like Cruise and others are doing an incredible job if you just kind of think about how complex the technology is to be able to drop off a package to nearly any address. That's an incredible complex feat. But then that last 10 feet, FEET, to get the goods to a customer door, that's, I'd say, even a higher level of complexity.
Yeah, Sam, if I could just add, you're absolutely right. I think people think about autonomous vehicles serving last mile. You imagine like a robot rolling out the back of a Cruise vehicle and dropping that package on the doorstep, and that's not how it's going to work initially, right? And so then the obvious question is, well, if you've got to have somebody in that vehicle who's going to pick up the package and deliver on the doorstep, to Sam's earlier point, like what is the innovation? And from Cruise's perspective, there's going to be an evolution, but today the innovation is making streets safer, right? An AV, our AVs are safer on the road than a individual who's looking at their cell phone, playing words with friends, maybe getting distracted. But also, and I don't know if we're going to touch on this later, but we are all electric now. So when you think about converting vehicle miles traveled, not to use jargon, but when you think about converting the number of miles traveled in the delivery pipeline over to electric miles, this is the quickest way to do that. So we're going to begin to see some of those benefits in terms of emissions reduction and in terms of safety immediately. And as the technology progresses and we solve that last 10 feet, we'll have a panel on last 10 feet at some point. We will see continued innovation. So it's happening along a spectrum. But it's saying that's a great one to make.
Yeah, and just to touch on the electric piece, that's really important from a Walmart perspective for our business. And that's why we're excited with both, Gatik and Cruise. We've got an electric powertrain that we've moved to. And so we're trying to make our supply chain as green as possible. And so we're tackling climate change to make our own operations by targeting zero emissions by 2040. And we have a goal set for 100% renewable energy by 2035. And then we have our Project Gigaton, that is one of the largest private sector consortiums for climate action change. And so it's really important to us and part of our business strategy as well.
I did want to talk a little bit about the electric side, and so Carter and Rachel, I think you've talked to it, but Sam, I was curious, like if you wanted to chip in on sort of why electrify and automate at the same time. Why is Gatik choosing to do both of those at once? I think Carter gave us an intro to that, but I'd love to hear your take too.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing I'll note, at the risk of being a bit personal here, we were chatting in kind of the green room, quote unquote, before hopping on here, and we all have kids, right? So from a very personal note, there's a reason that Walmart has set these very admirable sustainability goals. It's because we want to ensure that this planet's going to be here and healthy and sustainable for our kids. And when I say we, I mean the consumers that are demanding that corporations, large organizations act in this responsible way. And it's no different for Gatik. The other nice part about that is that it becomes a market incentive. So when I say that Walmart nudged us to move into electric vehicles, I'm being a little bit coy in the way that I'm framing that, right? So they gave us an opportunity and said, do you want it? So of course, right away, we had to come up with a solution for that. And we launched the first Class 6 autonomous electric box truck in North America. And that's the vehicle that you see behind us over here. We worked with a few good partners for that. And going forward, we'll continue working with really good partners to essentially ensure that we have these electric powertrains for that middle mile segment. The reason why it's very conducive not only to autonomy, but also to middle mile is on the middle mile side of things, you can have a charging station at the pickup spot. So unlike other use cases where you're typically trading off payload for distance. In this case, the average route is going to be about 50 miles or so, and you're reloading the vehicle every time you are loading the vehicle with new and fresh goods. So that means that every hour you're getting some new juice in the batteries, which makes it very conducive, which makes the middle mile very conducive for electrification. And on the autonomy side of things, we know that an autonomous stack, so the perception stack, and we use a fully redundant stack with the whole suite of LiDARs, cameras, radars, ultrasonic sensors, localization sensors, redundant compute on board the vehicle. All of that drains quite a bit of power. So being able to have that power stored in electric batteries is more sustainable.
Carter?
Yeah, and on the cruise front, same is right. The impact on the planet, like I think we've basically reached consensus. I'm in Texas, not 100%, but it is 100 degrees today. And so whatever, I'm not in Canada. It's a little bit different experience, but I think we're beginning to see in earnest impacts of climate change. The need to take action is especially acute. But for cruise, just from a purely taking away altruism, you think about scaling up an enormous ride hailing and delivery business, and then you're going to switch it to electric, right? I mean, there's when you bake electrification into the business from the front end, it influences everything you do, from the way you plan about launching in a city to your day-to-day operations. And the lessons learned from operating a gas-powered fleet are really not going to transfer over to an electric fleet. It's going to be pretty limited. And then, at Cruise, we think about the two major negative externalities around the current paradigm. When we think about transportation, is safety and emissions. So if we're going to try to solve the safety piece, let's go ahead and solve the emissions piece as well. Like the future, I think we all acknowledge, is electric and autonomous. And so, we want to be at the forefront of that innovation and do it now. And that's, where we put it. That's where we placed our biggest bet.
Right. And changing gears a little bit, PAVE is an educational organization. And so one of the things I always am fascinated to hear about with projects like this and pilots and testing is, what are some of the best lessons that you've learned and things you'd like to pass on? So Rachel, I'd love to start with you actually and hear about, what Walmart set out to learn from your pilots with Gatik and Cruise and other AV developers. And, have there been any surprise lessons learned or things that you'd like to share from that experience?
Yeah, with all of our pilots, we're interested to learn how customers react to the technology, where does it make sense in our business, and how does it scale? And so one of the things that, the best ideas that we get, I think, come directly from our associates and our customers. And for instance, one of the ideas that our associates had, like we mentioned in the Bentonville, Arkansas operation with Gatik, we're in the process of removing the driver. And so we turned to our associates for, well, if there's not a driver there, how are you going to interact with the vehicle? And they came up with some great ideas for how we could do that. And working with Gatik, they implemented that and brought that to life. And so now we have a really integrated way, with the vehicle and with their devices that they have in the store, how they know when the vehicle arrives, how they can communicate that they've loaded the vehicle. And so that interaction of human and technology has been really interesting as we've done these tests.
Definitely. And Sam, I'd like to turn to you now and ask, what has Gatik learned about the opportunities and challenges in automated middle mile from your work with Walmart so far?
I would run out the clock, honestly, if I want to even have a list of learnings. So I'll touch on a couple of principles. The first one is that we usually kick off any meeting, any decision point, first talking about safety, and then talking about the voice of the customer. And we close those gatherings in the same fashion, talking about safety and talking about the voice of the customer. So always making sure that that's there front and center while we're navigating internally any of our next steps. The second one of three is we realized that you can automate the driving task, but the driver does more than driving. The driver communicates, and that's what Rachel was referring to there. So how are you going to automate the communication piece between the vehicle and the stores? And the driver also helps with unloading or conducts the unloading, which is another solution that we're looking to solve for as well. So when you're looking to offer a product, what are the different reverberations that automating a part of that product might have, and how can you offer a complete package? And the final piece, I'll refer again to the vehicle that's behind me there. It's digital, just in case you were wondering. And that is the first, and to my knowledge, only Class 3 autonomous vehicle available in North America. So when we initially launched with Walmart, we did so with a smaller form factor, and very, very quickly learned that for their middle mile requirements, we needed something a little bit larger. So being able to be responsive to customer needs, and then being able to have an engineering team that is world-class and can really solve problems very quickly in a safe manner, so that you're able to update your product as needed to ensure it's meeting your customers' needs. Especially when the middle mile is so new, and a lot of those needs are still being discovered jointly with the customer, with Walmart in this case.
Definitely. And Carter, same question to you. What has Cruise learned about the opportunities and challenges of automated last mile delivery from your work with Walmart?
I think the biggest lesson that I have learned from the process with Walmart in Arizona is the need for really early engagement and education with everyone from customers to law enforcement to elected officials, because this is a new technology, and because we are on sort of the front end, the consumer facing piece of that delivery, there's going to be a lot of public interaction with our vehicles, with our infrastructure. And we're still in the process, the public is still in the process of growing accustomed to these vehicles that don't have an individual in them, or they're interacting with a computer. And so that human element, like humans are kind of the problem with driving cars, and they can be, they are also a group that we need to educate around how to interact with this new technology. So just it's not fancy or sort of blingy, but that customer education, the law enforcement education, as well as dealing with elected officials and planning departments that are going to be dealing with these vehicles, is really, really important to the success of any sort of pilot program.
Absolutely. And thinking real quick, I'd like to squeeze in another question, but thinking about those changes that you're talking about of how automation might affect things, we get a lot of questions on, how will increasing automation affect like the physical presence of Walmart? Will stores have to change to facilitate these electric autonomous logistics? Will you need charging stations? Will stores become more like distribution centers? I think there's a whole range of questions that the public sort of has on that. So I would love, Rachel, if you could touch on that, and then Sam and Carter, if you have anything to add from your end, of course, as the AV developers.
Yeah, I think, the short answer, Tabitha, is everything and all of it. So you've already seen us, with our market fulfillment centers, we're already changing our stores to go that way. And then I think you're going to see us over the coming years continue to evolve that even further. So, you mentioned electric charging infrastructure. We've had a partnership with Electrify America over the years to add chargers to our stores for our customers. We're also looking at how, with Cruise and Gatik, how we add chargers to our stores for them in the operation that we have in Louisiana there with Gatik. Like Sam mentioned, the charger's really useful being on site because we can take, any downtime essentially out of the operation as the associates help load and unload it while it's getting charged. So I think you're going to see a number of improvements over the years through automation, through electrification, that'll really help enhance our stores and make our operation even better for our customers and associates.
Great. Carter, anything to add there?
No, Rachel's the expert on that, but I think we're seeing this with I'm thinking about Starbucks or the Chick-fil-A around the corner. They're all realizing they don't need to have as much of a footprint for walk-up customers. And I think what we're going to see, what we've already seen, and COVID turbocharged it like with so much else, is the decentralization of infrastructure and people and goods and services. And so, specifically for us, I think, fleet vehicles used to all be located at one spot. If they were electric, they were all charged in one location. And Cruise and others are thinking now, is that the right model? If we're picking up goods all over the place and delivering, covering large distances to make deliveries, like, is that the best way to think about it? So I think we're going to continue to see that decentralization in all aspects of the sort of the food chain there. And that's what the future is going to look like.
And Sam, any final point to bring us home there?
Yeah, really well said. So I guess I'll just share something a little bit more conceptual. It's no longer about consumers going to stores. Now it's about bringing stores to consumers, whether that's through a single pane of glass on your phone or your computer as an initial touch point, and then turning that into a physical touch point by having goods ready at a particular location where customers can just pick them up really quickly, or having them delivered to a customer's doorstep. All of the infrastructure that was mentioned here is really because of that shift, that we now are bringing stores to customers rather than expecting customers to always come into the retail locations. And those shifts, as described, are truly monumental.
Great. Well, that brings us nicely to the end of our time together. But Rachel, Sam, Carter, thank you all again for taking the time to join us this afternoon on this topic.
Thanks, Tabitha.
Thank you, Tabitha.
And a big thank you to our live audience, and especially those who submitted questions in advance. If you'd like to follow up with PAVE or one of the panelists on this topic, please reach out to us via our website contact form or just reply to your registration email. And as a reminder, we will be posting the full recording on our YouTube channel and website later this afternoon. Follow us on social media at PAVE Campaign to see that as soon as it's released. And please join us next Wednesday as we continue this look at AVs at work and different applications of technology. We'll be focusing on national security issues next week, and we look forward to having you join. Registration is available at our website. Thank you.